respect and aloha. I welcome you all. So I was asked to do a talk, and I selected this topic. It's called What is Enlightenment? Now, I also titled this series The Path We're On. And I look at it like, we're all on this path, and every day we wake up, we walk this path. And part of this presentation is about the path that I've been walking. And a lot of it is about the things that I've encountered along the way. Now, one of the things I want to tell you is that I only have 10 slides, so I should be done within about an hour. I'm just kidding. But if you were to count the slides, you will know exactly where I am, so you'll know how much more you have to endure. Okay, thanks. So this path that I personally am on is one of discovery. And part of this path is trying to understand some of the Buddha's teachings. And for me, it sort of started with trying to understand the Four Noble Truths, which I'm sure you folks are all very familiar with. But as I started to unpack what the Four Noble Truths were, I tried to understand, what does it mean and what does it mean to me in my life. So the first Noble Truth is about suffering. And the thing that I got out of trying to understand what is suffering, it sort of originates from the idea of impermanence. And it's not really an idea, it's reality, right? Everything changes. Nothing stays the same. Everything is moving. So whether it's your loved ones or yourself or your job or whatever, nothing is permanent. Everything is impermanent, and everything is changing. And then, how does that affect the second noble truth, which is, suffering has an origin? And if we find ourselves getting attached to any of these things that we would consider impermanent, and if we find ourselves attached to that, then that's always going to change. So those attachments are what causes that suffering. Because if we believe that this is going to be permanent forever, or it's a good feeling, or whatever is going to be everlasting, you have to be aware that because of impermanence, that's going to change, that's going to shift. So you have to be aware of that, and that is, in essence, kind of the origins of suffering. So then, how do you end this suffering? And that's something that I've been trying to figure out, is if there is impermanence and if there is this idea of us attaching to some of these things that are impermanent, how do we overcome that? How do we transcend that? And that's this idea of enlightenment. Okay? So that goes back to the talk about what is enlightenment. And then, of course, the path out of suffering is the Eightfold Path. For this talk, I wanted to explore a little bit about enlightenment and what does that really mean. And I'm speaking from my own personal perspective. And I think for anybody on this path, it really is your own personal experience with things like you're asking yourself the question, what is enlightenment? There's an old Zen saying. It says, Zen without the accompanying physical experience is nothing but empty discussion. And the martial way without truly realizing the mind is nothing but beastly behavior. So enlightenment is something that needs to be experienced yourself personally. Next. So in the process of trying to understand what is enlightenment and how do we get there, one of the things that you hear about are descriptions of enlightenment, one of which is sort of this momentary, let's say, aha moment. And it's oftentimes referred to as kensho. And I'll read you this sort of definition. Kensho is an initial insight or awakening, not full Buddhahood. It is to be followed by further training to deepen the insight and learn to express it in daily life. So this kensho moment is a moment that is a momentary awakening. But it's an awakening that gives you insight into what Buddha nature is. Now, we have these experiences, and it's very interesting, very fleeting, and you oftentimes ask yourself, wow, how does that affect me in my daily life? And how did people like Buddha really get to the point where they can have this kensho moment last throughout the entire day or the entire lifetime? And that, in a sense, is kind of the training that they've gone through to achieve enlightenment that's far greater than just the kensho moment. But for me, it's just the kensho moment. Next. Now, if you had attended the talk by Soho Machida, and he spoke on Buddha's Day of Enlightenment, and he spoke and also included something called the 10 ox herding tales. Now, I used to, for the longest time, call this the ox tail story. And somebody reminded me that, Burt, this is not about oxtail soup, this is about ox herding tales. Now, this is number 5. And so Soho Machida, he spoke about the 10 ox herding tales, and I thought it was very interesting because I've seen this presented in a number of different places. And when I was in Japan, I was on a little tour with some friends that were visiting ceramicists and potters and artists. And this artist, we were invited to his house, and he had, his name is Kozaki Khan, and he drew a lot of different kinds of really cool drawings. And he was actually one of the guys who got hired to do a sculpture for Roma Sakamoto during the time when they had the Taika drama called Roma. Anyway, so we were at his house, and I was looking at all the paintings and drawings, and I noticed that near the ceiling of his house, he had all the 10 ox herding stories drawn there. And I took a picture of all of them, but for the purpose of this talk, I wanted to focus on the number 5, which is sort of the taming of the ox. But for me, it was more than just looking at this drawing. It was a sort of a realization that here's an artist that has spent his whole life drawing in a somewhat modern but traditional method, and it had a lot of Zen elements in it. But in the process of his drawing, I think he imbibed this whole idea of incorporating this philosophy in his drawing, and to the extent where he undertook the drawing of these 10 ox herding tales. So I thought it was very interesting how it was integrated into his whole life and his whole profession. And for me, that was a sort of a moment of realization. But this number 5 is really about recognizing, the mind being, this ox, and actually realizing momentary glimpses of this Buddha nature and these sort of moments of kensho. And in this drawing is it's only number 5. You still got to get to 10, but it's sort of taking hold of that and trying to understand how to sort of grasp it and train it and understand it and incorporate that into your daily life. So next slide. So this next slide is, if you can see it, it's just a little frog in a pond. And I was hiking with a friend of mine. I had a job to do in Missouri, of all places, right? Missouri. And we were in a state park, and we were kind of walking along. And the park was very serene, and I think we were having some very serene sort of discussion. And then I came across this frog sitting on this rock in this pond, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. And I thought, well, let me take a picture because I need to grab this moment because it's so calming. So then I sort of straddled myself, in this area. Don't worry, I didn't fall into the pond, but I did try to take a picture of this frog. And in the effort of trying to capture that moment, I realized that it was futile. I couldn't capture this moment because it was the camera would never capture the sort of the real essence of it. So I was somewhat disappointed because it was, I was caught up in the idea that I could perhaps capture a serene moment with my camera. So then he asked me, so Burt, how was it? Taking a picture. And I said, well, sort of somewhat flippantly, I said, well, you see one frog, you see them all. And then he turned around and said, Burt, you see one frog and you see one frog. And that moment that he said that, I thought, wow, that's pretty profound. And it was kind of an aha moment for me. Just the interaction, the effort that I was going through, the mind sort of going and doing all these crazy things about trying to capture a picture. And then him saying what he said kind of got me to think about, the connection between the whole environment that I was currently in. And it was, for me, that was kind of a Kensho moment. Next. So next slide is something that we hear about a lot. We talk about, the lotus flower, and it is such a beautiful flower. But more symbolically, the lotus is growing out of the muck, and it creates this great looking flower and great looking leaves. And I was fortunate to be invited to a place here in Hawaii that has about an acre of lotus growing in it, and it's up in Haleiwa. And I was invited this past summer to visit. And when you go to these kinds of places, you cannot prevent from being awestruck by the beauty of it, and realizing how much symbolism results from just this flower growing in this sort of muck. And for us to be fortunate to have this actually being right here. So this is I call it a secret lotus pond because it's on private property and hard to get access to, but I was just very fortunate to see it. And by just seeing it, it was sort of an aha moment. It was another sort of a Kensho moment. Yes. So this is a picture that took place that I took in Korea. It's called the Unjusa Temple. It's a place that has about 1,000 Buddha sculptures in South Korea. It's the southern part of South Korea. And it was another tour that we went on to visit some potters and artists. But this was a monument. It's 1,000 Buddhas. And we went to this monument, and the story or the feeling that I got here was that, wow, this is 1,000 Buddhas, but we only have half an hour to see it all because that's when the bus was going to leave, right? So we basically got on the ground and we had about 30 minutes. And this is a pretty huge area. And in order to see everything, you have to basically race from where the bus drops you off all the way to the monument. And the monument is not only a valley, but it's also up on the hill. And there's Buddhas up along the hillside as well. So anyway, I'm moving through this whole area, taking pictures and enjoying just sort of the serenity of this valley. And I'm kind of looking at my watch, somewhat being cognizant of the time, and realizing that I am probably not going to be able to see all of this stuff, but I'm going to try to move as fast as I can and race through as much of it as possible. So this area was up on the top of a hill, and I had gone through most of the valley Buddhas, and then I was kind of hiking up the hill and looking for sort of what was up on this trail, what was at the end of the trail. And when I got to the end of the trail, I was sort of hiking around and looking around, and my wife was up there, and I was talking to her, and some other people came up, and I was thinking, oh man, I gotta get up. They said, well, there's also another peak on the other end of the valley, and you have to get up to that one because that one has some neat things too. You can see the entire valley from that perspective. And I thought, oh, geez, I gotta get up. I gotta get over there too because I want to get a picture of the entire valley. And then I came to this point when I asked myself, well, what am I doing on this side, this top of the mountain? What's so significant about this place? Why am I here? I need to be over there because I want to take a picture of this entire valley. And then I looked down, and that's when I saw the line Buddha. And I thought to myself, wow, this is another kind of potential moment because it's sort of that moment when your mind is racing around telling yourself, wow, I gotta be over there. I gotta do this. I gotta go someplace else, without really realizing what is underneath your feet. And to me, when I realized that, I thought, that's what happens when your mind is racing all over the place and not being present. And if you can be present, you can see the Buddha right at your footsteps. Next. So this is an interesting, when Soho Machida did his talk, this was an image that we had used to promote it. And this is the fasting Buddha. And this is the time when Buddha was trying to reach enlightenment. And he was part of the ascetic training that really was on the extreme of trying to fast and trying to deny your body of nutrients. Oftentimes when we go through our path and try to understand the things that might affect us, we oftentimes realize that we are walking this path in this body of ours. And our body, we're just human, right? So we have the five senses, and we have our needs and desires and wants. And if we're hungry, we eat. Sometimes we eat too much, and we get overweight. And sometimes, if you take that to the extreme and you think that in order for me to reach enlightenment, but this body is holding me back because it has these earthly desires, then maybe if I starve my body to the extent where I don't have those needs anymore, I can reach enlightenment. And Buddha tried to do this. He tried to get to a place where he denied his body of, basically trying to negate his body. And this is where he kind of got to. Now, what I love about this story is that he got to this place and then realized, hey, wait a minute, I don't like it here because I'm not feeling that good, and I'm all skinny, and I'm kind of hungry, and if I have to get to this place in order to get enlightened, what does that mean for everybody else? Does that mean everybody else has to get to this place too? And I think he realized that this is not the way. So, because if this path, this spiritual path, is for the benefit of everybody, they shouldn't have to go through this kind of extreme. So basically, he had the realization, this is not the way, and I've got to move on and figure something else out. Next. So love this slide. It's the, you know, we've got a Bodhi tree right outside in the front, where in front of the driveway, and I often love just looking at the leaves and looking at the tree. And there's also a bunch of Bodhi trees over at Balamoana Park too. But you know, in this picture, it was, of course, he's you know, Buddha's a lot more healthy. He looks like he's put a little weight and muscle on. He is much more content, and the realization at this stage is that, you know, the path that we're on should be accessible by everybody, and that basically became the root of, you know, the middle way and Mahayana Buddhism. And what I'm trying to understand is, as the middle way, how does it affect all of us? How do we, as just ordinary people, imbibe these lessons and walk this path and encounter enlightenment in ways that Buddha did, without having to go through the fasting stage? And so there is the answer to this does lie in kind of this picture and some of the things that you know, we practice as Buddhists. And sitting and meditating is just one of them. Next slide. This is the last slide, so I'm glad I didn't see any heads nodding off, so I'm very proud of you. I end with this question. I start with a question: what is enlightenment? And I end with this question: does enlightenment equal Pure Land? And for me, I've given you a sense of what I've experienced just from some of the things that I've gone through. But I want to leave you with this question for you to sort of contemplate. Does your enlightenment experience, does that equal Pure Land? And maybe next time I'll talk about this question. Thank you very much.